Found out there was one tape with Michael Cohen and him taping his client, Donald Trump. Now it turns out there are more tapes?
There are at least a dozen, and maybe more, but at least a dozen that have been turned over to federal prosecutors after attorneys for President Trump or the Trump Organization deemed them not subject to the attorney-client privilege. That's how they had designated them initially as they reviewed all the material seized from Cohen back in April, but that designation was withdrawn on Friday, and so federal prosecutors now have these recordings. We haven't heard them, but that we know of, they don't appear to contain the voice of Donald Trump. Rather, it seems like it's Michael Cohen talking to a bunch of reporters.
Interesting. And apparently we have no idea what's in these.
We don't know the subject matter. We don't know specifically who is heard, other than Cohen himself, because he did the recording. We know of the one tape where we're told Donald Trump and Cohen discuss a payment to silence Karen McDougal, the former Playboy model who alleged that she and Trump had an affair a decade prior, and that was 2 months before the election. And that one, raises all sorts of questions about possible campaign finance violations, and that's the main question for prosecutors as they build a case against Cohen.
But if there was a tape of Michael Cohen ordering Chinese food, the prosecutors wouldn't want it. So can we assume that there's something of interest that the prosecutors want on these tapes?
I mean, you never know. They may want to know a good Chinese place to go in Midtown, and that's an important skill in
Who doesn't?
New York. And, as Woody Allen says, how close is it to Midtown and how late is it open? I think it may be that these tapes are not of interest. It may be that the subject matter is of interest, but the voices on the tapes don't necessarily raise to the level. But if Cohen is, even if he's talking to reporters, say he's talking about something involving Donald Trump, and say it involves money transacting to some party, that potentially could be interesting. But federal prosecutors hadn't heard these tapes until now, because until this moment, they were designated as subject to the attorney-client privilege.
Paul Manafort's trial was supposed to start this week. What happened?
Yeah, it was supposed to start tomorrow, but the judge gave a little bit of a reprieve to both sides, so 6 more days to prepare. So July 31st is when this trial will begin, and today the lawyers will pick apart the jury questionnaire that potential jurors will have to submit to see whether they'll fit to be on the panel. Manafort he appeared in court for the first time in a while. He was wearing a dark green jail jumpsuit, and he appeared to be conversing with his lawyers. He kind of mouthed a few words to his wife, who was in court. But the judge simply agreed to give us a small respite, because the prosecutors had said, McGraw, that they wanted to introduce as many as 500 exhibits during the course of the trial, and that's so much evidence the defense said they just needed a little more time.
Do you see where they're not allowed to ask the jurors who they voted for?
Yeah, because it's not relevant.
Yeah.
And this is supposed to be free of politics, and in fact, the charges, remember, don't really relate to Donald Trump. Manafort was allegedly committing bank and tax fraud and being a little shifty with some offshore accounts due to his work in Ukraine. Prosecutors said that it crossed over into his time with the Trump campaign, but none of this directly relates to election meddling or potential collusion.
All right, so it starts end of the month. Aaron Katursky, have yourself a good day. Thanks.
You too, McGraw. Thanks.
633, Big 550, KTRS. Now let's check in with Tim Weiland in the St. Louis Closet Company Traffic Center.